Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Operations Policy and Planning Committee meeting for Monday, February 12th, 2024. I would like to begin our meeting by saying that the Board of Education recognizes and acknowledges the Esquimalt and Songhees nations on whose traditional territories we live, we learn, and we do our work. We continue to learn and we continue to grow as our own learning journey continues. I would like to seek an approval of the agenda for tonight's meeting. Do I have a mover for that? Trustee Painter, do I have a seconder? Do I need a seconder? I always forget this. I don't need a seconder. Excellent. Are there any amendments to be made for the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor of the agenda as presented? And that is unanimous. Next up is approval of the minutes from the January 22nd Operations Policy and Planning Committee meeting. Can I have a mover for that? Trustee Duncan, any amendments to the minutes as presented? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that too is unanimous. Any business arising from the minutes tonight? Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just wanted to check in. I know we had discussed an update coming this month to the standing committee around the long-range facilities plan progress and any recommendations for board consideration arising from the current long-range facilities plan. So yeah, just was wondering how that's going and if an update was available.
Through the chair, I can provide an update on that. I was actually thinking of bringing an update to the board meeting. Unfortunately, with everything wrapping up with Big High and all of the budget work, we haven't had an opportunity to call a meeting to look at that. The board motion does specify that the long-range facilities plan, the committee, meet, which includes quite a few members, including members of the public, student, parents, and so just looking for some feedback as to thoughts on the possibility of bringing that group down to a smaller working group that could include facilities, financial services, trustees, anyone that would be a little bit easier to get together to do that review, to bring something back to the board. I know that the idea was that we weren't putting a lot of work on this because it wasn't something that was required right away. We're just finding that it's just really challenging right now to do a good job of this review, to bring something back right now.
Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, no, thank you. Through the chair to the secretary treasurer. Yeah, I appreciate what a busy time it is at the moment. So maybe perhaps we could consider looking to add a motion to the board meeting agenda, just addressing any kind of issue with the membership under the terms of reference. So yeah, I guess my suggestion would be that we discuss it during our board agenda planning next week.
Any further business arising from the minutes? Seeing none, we'll move into our presentation portion of the evening, starting off with Dr. Jeff Davis on behalf of the International Student Program.
Thank you very much, Chair Gagnon. I am surprised I'm first on the agenda. I think this is my first time ever being first on the agenda. So thank you for having me tonight. I wrote a very brief memo. It's on page 7 of the pack up, and it's just an overview of the presentation. There are 8 items that I'm going to be addressing. And then the next biannual report will be April 2024. And just a note on enrollment projections. But I'll jump right into the presentation. I'll share my screen. And wrong screen. I'm going to stop that one and do it this way. There we go. Okay. All right, so brief presentation tonight. As I mentioned, there's about 8 items I'm going to discuss as part of the annual report. Starting off contextually with international education in British Columbia. Currently 42 of 60 school districts in BC host international students on study permits. That's from our provincial association data, which we are a member of. And as you can see, there's about 16,000, not about, but there's precisely 16,788 international students in British Columbia. And I retrieved this from a contact at the Ministry of Education earlier this year. So that's come down slightly since the pandemic. I think it was pre-pandemic, it was closer to about just under 20,000 students. I always like to start a presentation celebrating student learning and success and talking about students who've had positive influence through their own actions and also through the interactions and sharing between international students and local or domestic students. First person that I wanted to talk about is Kayla from Victoria High School. She graduated in 2016. Prior to that, probably starting in about 2014, she was recommended by one of her teachers to do some work with international education during the summers. And she did that for many years and at school, and as a part of that opportunity, she developed many friendships and had opportunities in Victoria to learn alongside international students. I really like what Kayla has said here about the benefits that she experienced, where she gained an intercultural appreciation and instinct, she called it, picking up some language of many different places. And the second point about it being such a positive experience for her because she was able to learn a lot about the world without leaving Victoria. Kayla right now is on a work term co-op from UVic at the University of Tokyo Marine Science, Tokyo University Marine Science and Technology. And I believe she was down in Kyushu in southern Japan doing some work. So great opportunity for Kayla, and I'm sure I'll hear all about it when she comes back and see her in the summertime. An enrollment update for the International Student Program. Snapshot as of February 1st, 913 students, 35 countries and regions represented. And you can see the top 10 enrolling regions: Japan, China, Mexico, Germany, Italy, Brazil, Thailand, South Korea, Spain, and Vietnam. And this was very similar to what we would have seen just prior to the pandemic, but there are a few regions that have had more students coming since the end of the pandemic, mainly Germany and Italy, and a few regions where fewer students have been coming, specifically South Korea and Vietnam. Moving forward, you can see the final projected budget figures that were submitted about a week and a half ago with the regular program, short-term and group, and the total revenue from both programs. And again, that's projected. We still have to get to the end of the year, but those will be fairly close. And that's the revenues are slightly higher than the preliminary budget figures, and that's because of increased enrollment. I've shared this slide in other formats, but it's just a review of the budget allocations, where you can see the total 17.564, and you can see how it's broken down into 3 areas: district funds, school-based funding, district funds at 38%, school-based funding at 41.3%, and international or ISP operations at 20.7%. Recommendations for future student enrollment. So this has been a little bit of a adaptation period for us, or implementation period, I would say, as we implement the international student enrollment policy and regulation this year. So the recommended enrollment level for 24-25 is 810 FTE. And due to where we are in the enrollment cycle, it's difficult for me to pinpoint a precise number. So that's plus or minus 10%, depending on how things go over the next several months. I just wanted to also raise something that we use when we talk about attrition or cancellations. We use a fancy term, correction coefficient. I need to find something better that's more, but it's what we use. So annually, we will have about 15 to 20% of all the international student applications that come in are canceled. And they may be canceled for study permit denials by IRCC, delays by IRCC, family decisions. That's a big one, where something happens within the family that's where a student is coming to us and they change their mind, or deferred start dates. So it's a constant. We're often having to refill those spaces, sometimes later in the year, when people change their decisions, or there's a study permit denial or something of that nature. Another significant announcement came January 22nd. I'm sure that folks here on the call have been reading about various reports related to this decision by IRCC. They announced some big changes to the federal international student program, and I've included the link. It's just an IRCC link that you can have a look at. But as a district, for our ministry-funded international students, we should expect at least a 35% decrease for next year compared to this year. So it's my understanding is that provinces like British Columbia and Ontario will be having a steeper reduction than other provinces that don't have as many international students. Next slide. This is just some information, and I won't go through it in too much detail. I'll maybe wait till the end, and if there are questions, we can discuss then. But it's just the latest Bergar enrollment data, which includes projected enrollment, school capacity, projected enrollment, not including international, and then the projected international enrollment. So 2 slides for elementary. You can see the goal would be to have international students at every single elementary school, and that's been a goal, but it's not quite there yet. You can see Hillcrest right now would have the largest number of international students, and they do have quite a significant amount of space, but we are working on this. We are seeing a slight increase in the numbers of elementary aged international students. Middle schools, same story as elementary, a slight increase, which is great. And you can see Arbutus right now has the most students, and what we are projecting to have international students at all middle schools. Secondary, I was with the latest Vergar data. I was, this projected enrollment levels, the percentages by school was better than I had initially anticipated, more equitably distributed. International tuition fees. So this year, and these are all publicly available on the International Education website. The tuition fees for this year are $16,000, and for next year, $16,500. And my second last item to discuss very briefly is just around educational agencies. I, over the years, have had quite a number of questions on the role of an educational agent and what they do and how they support students or how they work with the school district or the international education department. You can see this is a picture of my colleague Pilar Devoki outside our beautiful Mount Douglas with 2 partners, agency representatives from a company called International Master Plan out of Mexico, and they do send students on a short-term and a long-term basis. And many of these agencies visit once or twice a year to learn more about the school district and how we operate and what kind of supports are available for students. This is an example. But typically an educational agent is, a very small business owner. These are not large companies, and they have a small physical site where parents and families visit in the country where students are coming from. In this example, Mexico. They may have more than one office. They may be a kind of a larger company with remote offices, not remote, but satellite offices. They serve a critical role in supporting students and families during the educational experience, particularly at the beginning with the admissions process, which can take 6 to 10 months with the support, with helping procure a study permit, with working with our office on homestay placement, admissions, school placement, and of course the fee collection process. And along with that, there's many other, during the student's time here, communication and support between the International Education Office, staff members and the agency and the family and the parents and of course the student. You can see International Education has signed agreements with 901 educational agents from 39 countries and regions, which is a lot of communication. And there are currently 788 active agents, and that means that these active agents have students or are actively communicating, and they have had students with us recently. And to finish off with another student success story, I just wanted to talk about a student who came to Victoria in 2012. Phi or Tenapon. I've checked the pronunciation with Phi, and that's it. Phi is someone that we've kept in close contact with international education. She visits frequently and is always wanting to do what she can to support. She's come in and spoken with new international students on what to expect, and her pathway with starting at Uplands at ATP on a 5-month program, and then heading on to Victoria High School, graduating, and then heading to UVic and doing a Bachelor of Commerce. And she's in her start of her work life been winning some kind of employee performance awards at RBC, and her specialty is business analytics. And it's always great to see Phi and her family. Her brother also studied in Victoria, and her mom visits frequently from Bangkok. So that's all I have today for my presentation. Hope it wasn't too long, and thanks for having me.
Thank you, Director Davis. I'll open the floor for questions for the director. Trustee Duncan, before I go to you, I just want to check to see if our partners around the room have any questions first before I kick it over to trustees. Seeing none, Trustee Duncan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Davis, for your presentation tonight. I just wanted to dive into the tables that you provided. These are the enrollment related tables that highlight both the elementary, middle, and high school school capacities, and then the projections of enrollment for the next school year, and then your projected international enrollment. So the elementary table, it looks like at the moment, we're projecting that there will be 2 schools that are over enrolled, Torquay and Willows. And then we are also then enrolling international students. Or if you could give us a bit of context, I think I found that as well at the middle school level, where the numbers indicate, at least for the next school year, that we are anticipating to be over enrolled. I think it was at Cedar Hill and Colquitt's, and then we are also having some international enrollment there. So I just wondered if you could speak to that for us.
Yes, absolutely. I would need to double check to be 100% certain, but I'm pretty sure these would be just returning students, right? In regards to the Willows, I'm quite certain that enrollment is a student that's been at the school and is just returning. And the other, Torquay, the 7 students at Torquay, I will look into that carefully and get back to you. But quite often with elementary, the enrollment, there, of course, there's they would typically start, well, they could start at any grade, but there are a lot of returning students, but I don't have that data at my fingertips. And same thing with the middle school. I would presume those are returning students, and that's why you see that. Yeah.
I'll throw it to the senior leadership team first.
Thank you. I just also want to, through the chair, mention that the projected enrollments are not yet finalized. And so these are numbers that have come in from Beauregard. What we're right now looking at are numbers that are actual numbers. So you should see actual numbers coming to the biannual report in April. So some may be higher than what we're actually seeing in schools. We don't have the information quite yet. We have it over the next couple of weeks.
Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks so much for that additional context. Yeah, when I read the chart, my understanding was that the projected enrollment for the next school year doesn't include international student enrollment. But I appreciate that the caveat might be that for returning international students, they're actually included in those numbers. So yeah, would appreciate the clarity when you're able. And then the other thing was just around our projection over the next 3 years. So one of the things that certainly our board policy was trying to address was schools where we really have not had space for a number of years, and we were finding that the schools were being over enrolled. And so in order to kind of move away from that and address and balance and make sure there's space for local resident students, we understood that there would be a number of years of reduced international student enrollment. And so I appreciate that we're seeing that, certainly at the high school level, with some reallocations and some strides being made at a few schools in particular to address over enrollment. But we appreciate that it's over a number of years, and that we're keeping spots for students, international students, where we had previously made a commitment over a number of years. But that said, I wondered if we can expect the 3 years of enrollment data and projections during the biannual report, if that's what's intended, and then moving forward during the annual reporting cycle.
I can start anyways. I don't want to jump in front of Director Davis, but I can start with that. The goal is to provide this in the biannual. I think what you'll see moving forward is a report in September, which would be the annual report, followed by one in November and again in April as we move closer to the next school year. So when we're looking at these numbers, as we've seen, there's lots of factors now that we're addressing, both the federal government's decision and our policies and our continuous growth in the district. So you will see a reduction in numbers over the next couple. Well, you'll see some changes in the next couple of weeks with regards to the projected enrollments. Just to be clear, those international students who are returning are in the column that is projected international enrollment. So that column should speak to those students who are currently in our schools who are returning for next year. And you may see additions to that number. You will not see additions to the number in schools that do not have space unless they, first of all, had already been in that school this year or had already submitted their applications prior to, I would say, October of 2023. So we can bring forward 3-year projections for the April.
Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Superintendent Whitten. Appreciate that. Just to confirm, though, that the 3-year projections, they'll be provided this time in April, but normally they will be included in the annual report in September each year. Yeah, okay, great. Thank you very much. And Chair, I just had one more question, if I may, if there's no one else that wants to speak to this particular report. And Dr. Davis looks like he might want to add something, so I will yield the floor.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment on the 3-year projections that we will have to factor in also. I don't know how we'll do that, but we'll have to contemplate the correction coefficient, because there are returning students who have a change of heart. Perhaps they graduate earlier than anticipated, or family changes their plans. So that is also something to consider.
Trustee Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Dr. Davis. I learned a new term this evening. I don't envy you for having to apply that term in practice. It doesn't sound fun.
No.
My only other question really related to the report was around tuition fees. We know the board's approved an increase for the coming school year. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts you wanted to share this evening with the board members here around potential for further tuition or other fee increases in 2025, 2026, I guess it would be.
Of course, we're, considering an increase for 25, 26, certainly. I would want to, be working with SLT and finance and thinking carefully before making a decision. And then if we were going to announce that, it would have to come in the next several months, just for families to prepare, for returning students, for new students who are considering Victoria. Right now, our tuition fee is top 3 in British Columbia, along with a couple other districts. I don't want to make any comments right now, but certainly would be prepared to talk about it at a future date.
Trustee Duncan.
Sorry, just one more follow-up. If we as a board would need to make a decision about that in the next few months, would the April biannual report, if we discussed it and made decision by the end of April, be soon enough to implement a change in the 2025-26 school year? Just in terms of timing, want to keep in mind when a board decision would be required in order to see any kind of changes to either the tuition amounts or the various fees increase in that school year.
Yeah, that would be tight, but I think that would be a reasonable timeline. I think that would be just about the limit, but that would be, yes, we can do that.
Thank you.
I'll wade in with a question of my own, just in regards to the IRCC announcement and the expected 35 or more percent less enrollment next year. Do we foresee that being more new students or students that have already been enrolled, or kind of a combination of both? Just wondering if you have a flavor of how we foresee who specifically won't be coming next year.
Yeah, just backing up a little bit, this will be families where the parents are on a study permit, or a family member where a parent might be on an open work permit that is directly connected to the other parent's study permit. So it wouldn't be students on study permit. So it's ministry funded international students, that group of students. And I couldn't really comment too much on going back to your question, it would be only for new students because the policy change is related only to new. So anyone who's already here on a study permit or work permit, they're not making any changes. But if for new applicants, there's a change, I understand.
Great, thank you. Trustee Kwan.
All right, I'm going to follow up to that if I may. And this might actually be a question for our Associate Secretary Treasurer as well, or our Secretary Treasurer. And just to clarify, that reduction wouldn't actually affect what we're estimating with our enrollment numbers, because those would come in September anyway. Am I correct in that assumption? You're muted.
I'm muted. Yep, there you go. Good stuff. Associate Secretary Treasurer.
Thanks through the chair. So in my enrollment memo, I do consider that as something because it would impact September 1st, 2024 enrollments.
Any final questions for Director Davis? Trustee Kwan.
And actually, this is a question I'm not sure whether Director Davis should be answering this, or maybe someone from the finance team is better suited. And so it's kind of related to what Trustee Duncan was asking earlier, and just really a question generally about. I know that we're struggling this year to come up with that that percentage that the district can still take you know, from the international student program and help out in schools. And so, you know, my question is really these the $500 per student increase, is that really going to, you know, is that really going to make a difference when we're seeing, you know, some of these expenses come up? Is that really in relation to, is that increase expected in relation to expenses, or are we going to find our expenses increasing further than what we're raising our tuition fees?
Julie, did you want to tackle that one first, and I can add if necessary?
Through the chair. Any increase in international tuition fee will have a positive impact on the structural deficit. So I did factor that in when I'm looking at the projected deficit. It definitely, like, the increase in fees are supposed to go to cover increase in salary costs as well. However, the way that the mechanism works, that where we take a percentage of their gross revenue, by its nature, the board will benefit from it.
If there are no further questions, we will move along in our agenda to District Principal Short and her presentation on childcare on school grounds.
Thank you, everyone. Nice to see you all. Thank you, Jeff. I always learn something new from you, so appreciate the stories of the students. Okay, I'm going to share my screen here. You're not seeing the right screen, are you?
You're sharing your desktop currently, show me.
All right, it's coming. The anticipation. Everyone can take a big breath. How does that look? Good?
We're just seeing not the presentation slide at the moment. We're seeing the that looks good.
Okay. Yeah, so I have the pleasure of offering an update on childcare on school grounds. Happy to be here. Just gonna, might just have to, sorry, I'm gonna have to try this again. No?
No, that was the notes
Okay.
view.
Hang on, here we go. Third time's the charm.
You should have an option to be able to switch the views.
So you're seeing, okay.
We're seeing the notes. Yeah, you should be able to swap if you're on two monitors.
Still seeing the notes?
Yes, we are at the moment.
Okay. Oh, and my apologies. I did actually give this a really good try before we.
Okay, that's the right view on our side. Oh, it was for a moment, but now it's gone to the note view again.
Okay. Good.
Yes,
All right.
thank you, Sharon.
Yeah. Thanks for your patience. All right. So this evening, I just wanted to offer an update on where we're at, some background information, a little history lesson to go back in time a bit. And I understand we want to learn more about just where we're at right now and the expansion that's taking place and an example of how it's going as we move through this current transformation. Yeah, I want to start right back to, I think, 2018 for anyone new at the table. The BC government introduced a childcare plan in 2018. And really what that was an outline or a blueprint for all that was to come to increase access for families, for childcare, and for all families who need it at an affordable price. And part of that was including moving the childcare sector into education, which really is a very significant shift in how we do things. And I'm going to speak in detail about that. The amalgamation of childcare with education, it signifies, I think, lots of shifts to come, but really an acknowledgement of the importance of early care and learning as part of a child's trajectory and learning journey, and especially in their future educational success in our K-12 system. So that amalgamation really solidified that acknowledgement, which was a celebration for all of us in the early years. We know that kids learn the most from birth to 5. And so by bringing childcare to the table as equal partners with education, we're really placing more value on all that represents. This is something happening not just in our province, really it's a nationwide endeavor. I think to note too that the access for families and the subsidies for families was also a really big piece of the transition. All right, a little overview of where we are now, and let's just take a moment to take in the joy of this photo. This is at our childcare center located on the Cloverdale school grounds. And so right now we have just over 100 licensed childcare spaces in school grounds. And these spaces are operated by 36 providers. So people who offer the care to children, we call them providers. And close to 2,500 children are receiving childcare on school grounds. I think the service delivery of these operations starts at birth. So we have infant toddler care, we have group childcare, which is 3 to 5 year olds. And then of course, before and after school care for K to 5 students. The 0 to 5 year old care and really much of our before and after care is offered in the studios built by our own facilities department. So it's really not new to have before and after care offered at school. That's something many of us have seen and experienced for many years. However, integrating childcare, especially from infant to age 5 into the education system is, again, a really vast transformation. It'll transcend all of us here tonight, the impact of that. But obviously, we know what it's going to mean for the little ones. So how are we doing this? What does this look like for all of us? I think in the past, and the operators that have been offering care on school grounds for many years, they came to the school board and requested to rent space to offer childcare, much like an organization might come to us to request space for volleyball or to play pickleball, as I think is common. And that's really changed for us now, because we are, instead of taking those transactional agreements, we're really thinking of this as a service and a space agreement. They were renting space from the board until now, and now we find a space, and we are requesting and searching for providers through a process of an RFP process, and we continue to grow that. I'm going to get into a little bit more details, but I think primarily in the past, operations were transactional and really were a rental agreement. We're now moving into a much more two-way space and service agreement. So let's just take a look at where we're at. This is on this slide, we have a list of all the providers offering childcare in our elementary schools. We have a picture of the handbook that really is the connector between the childcare providers in the school and as well as the district. And we also have a picture of the providers all coming together, which is something new for us and just fills my heart. So to expand space and strengthen the service, we really have to challenge how we have viewed education and recognize that times are changing. Families are changing, childhood is changing. And so that's what this is all about, really, just deeply examining where we're at and where we're going next. We've really begun to make some important shifts, and mostly, I think, through asking some really hard questions, looking at equity, looking at improving access and quality. And so in doing that, when we are now requesting providers, we're able to influence what that care looks like and how we can ensure the quality for our littlest beings. I think for you, this might just look like a list. I'm just looking at it, and I saw Connor on the call tonight. He's a principal at Brayfoot, and he's a perfect example of part of our community really building strength in working together with our providers. So each one of these providers on the list represent so much staff and so much potential. So when I look at this list, it really is the work. It's building relationships with each one of these providers and seeing where we can take this together. I think it's important that I really mention about where this, if we're talking about where we are currently and where we want to go, we want to keep our hopes for children at the heart of this. And I always think we hope for childhoods to be filled with joy and play and imagination and comfortable routines and lovely relationships. And many children simply don't have the environments or access to those experiences. So to strengthen childhoods for many, this right here, these people on this list have such incredible potential and possibility and are doing the hard work every day. When I first had childcare added to my portfolio, naturally you just kind of want to ground yourself in where we're at, and you want to make a plan. But sometimes, relationships have to come before plans. And so a little bit of a grounding was, where are we now and where do we need to go if the BC government is hoping for a coordinated or integrated system of childcare on school grounds? And in speaking with the providers that we currently already had on school grounds, I recognize that for the most part, we were sharing geography. There was some engagement, there was good relationships, but it was limited, right? And so we started along the path of building strength and relationship. And really that is the work. You can't underscore how important it is to lift up our sector who are providing that care. That really is the only way forward. And sharing communication. Communication, as you'll see as a theme tonight, just communication with families, communication between district and providers, between school and providers. That's really where it's at. So much of the work has been figuring out paths to these channels of communication. I think I think we're about right here. I've been deeply thinking, okay, where should we place ourselves right now? Recently, we've had some really great shifts forward, which I credit to the providers themselves, to our fabulous facilities department, senior leadership, all these stakeholders working together. But really, this is becoming a coordinated effort. And in providing some professional learning with our providers recently, I recognized the desire that they have to be more connected to our schools and really begin to help shape and share about the children who are entering our buildings. Okay. Speaking of communication, I really wanted to just, again, shout out the collaborative effort that it takes to work through this integration. And really, there's lots and lots of boulders in the path. It's tricky territory because it's new territory. And lots of people back away when I enter the room because there's some, this is something different, something new to think about, and it's not always easy. So thank you to Andy and his team. We've really been improving access for families. So having childcare on school grounds, a page on our district website for families to access where they can find care for their little ones, and as well on each elementary school website, a tab for families to another point of access, so that we can improve those channels of communication for everyone. And again, these small nuances add to the bigger picture of the full integration and what that might look and feel like for us. It's a pleasure to talk about equity when it comes to this growing initiative, because truly, I've struggled with equity as an educator all through my career. It's always something we are heavy on our hearts. How do we do this? But when we speak about improving access, I don't know if any of you have experienced that 3 p.m. anxiety if you're a working parent and you work until 5 or 6, and at 3 o'clock, your children are finished school. That's a real feeling. That's real and raw for most parents. So to think that there's potential in easing across the district at all of our schools, that anxiety for families is a true effort of equity, and one I think will really transform how our family dynamic and our sense of community. I think I was going to just speak to these little friends on the picture here, because I don't get to spend much time with you. And so I want to take the opportunity to really just think about childhood when you are focusing on the K-12 system, which is your role, and how our littlest beings, before they're moving into our system, that potential of childcare to really help shape that trajectory. The top 5 things that we constantly say all kids deserve and have the right to, and you wish for, is connection, and play and talking, community, and health and safe places of care. And whether that be a home or a childcare, when you think of those top 5 things, if we are able to offer childcare to all little ones who need it at a price that families can access, then we are doing a service to society. Oh, this is another joyful slide. See, everybody? You know, this is really a celebration of our facilities department because they do such incredible work, stretching every dollar to make the best spaces possible for children. And it's huge. It's a hugely significant part of the planning of the endeavor, really, of balancing the growth of space with quality of care. It's easy for us to just build a lot of buildings. What goes on in those buildings is what's monumental. So without them, we couldn't do this work, and I have so much gratitude. And also just a highlight of the grounds, because when we think about equity and we think about our little ones, we know that there's just more screen time than ever and less interaction than ever, and communication among family members due to increased screens. So when you see these green spaces and you know that a child is heading to a place where they can explore and enjoy the green space and connect with nature, again, a huge access point. And really, when we think of our strategic plan, it's yes, as far as growth in mental wellness and growth in physical literacy. It can all happen here for kids who might not necessarily have it. Right here, we have just a sample of the growth over the past 2 years. I know this growth has been taking place slowly since the childcare plan was implemented through the New Spaces grant funding. And so since 2022, you can just take a look at that yourself, but there is, even though in my role, it feels like we're slogging along, and I get hundreds of emails from families, you know, just wishing and hoping for care. We can't lose sight of the growth that is taking place. So here, right here, speaking of the New Spaces grant funding, these are the projects that we have completed and are in progress. And yeah, I think just, again, incredible work. These child care sites are open and thriving, and also not without pebbles in the path. And then our in progress sites, as you can see, a long list of projects on the go in various stages, which I'll speak to in a moment. The picture on the top right is our telecom childcare, which is the childcare that most recently opened alongside View Royal. So that's really heartwarming. And the bottom right is the Lake Hill childcare in progress. And just as we move through this expansion, we're always thinking about the enrollment projections and the space on school grounds. The waitlist data our providers offer us, you know, the waitlist they currently have. Our municipalities, Saanich and Greater Victoria, both have fairly comprehensive childcare action plans, which include data that helps to inform. I'm excited that we're heading into another year of the check, the Childhood Experience Questionnaire, similar to the EDI. That's going to offer us important data from families, again, as to where the most pinch points are, and how we can best prioritize as we move along. Again, to improve and strengthen our communication with anyone who has interest or is questioning the progress, this is a little scaffold. I'm so excited to be learning about building, and Mark and team I have all this new terminology that is so impressive. If only I could use it. But you can see that we move along. There's a lot of steps to this work, and it's an incredible process with lots of tradespeople. Anyone who's renovated knows how much coordination goes into something like this. So again, just master planning. And we will continue to work on this. This is something that I hope to share more broadly with families, especially who are curious, when is my school going to be built? We'll keep updating so they have an idea of where they're moving along the scaffold, and then offer updates, which will be very exciting for anyone. Yeah, so again, just really thinking about when we talk about where we are currently, it's really about bridge building. That's in the current operations of childcare. We are, well, Marnie and team are building the bridges, literally. And my work more is in that continuity of care and working with schools and providers to just try to carve out a path. And what a gift to be sharing the beautiful school grounds that we have in our district, because it's an older district. I know sometimes that causes a lot of headaches, but it's also a virtue, because these larger, these school grounds have larger, grounds to play for kids, because they have history, just like our older houses have larger lots. It's same can be said for our school grounds. So it's a real pleasure to see children from 0 to grade 5 enjoying the beauty of our grounds. So when we talk about what that bridge looks like, this to you, I'm sure just looks like a lot of people in bubbles, but it brings me such joy to speak to this slide, because this is the future. This is where we are going. We have Quebec as a province a little bit more ahead of us. Australia as a nation has really embraced the concept of community and collaborative continuity of care and learning, and here we go walking slowly towards this. But right here we have stakeholders who are all absolutely so profoundly integral to the trajectory of our children and their educational success in the K-12 system. And all of this is happening prior to even coming to school. So we're talking about an upstream approach to all the issues that we're talking about later on. We're dealing with them before they happen down here, and making sure children can feel great about who they are and feel like they have the capacity to be that educated citizen. We talk with early childhood educators, the kindergarten teachers, childcare providers. I've met with each group around this in this bubble, and we've really dug deep as to what does it feel like to be welcomed into a school? What does it look like for a school to be ready for the increasing diversity in our schools, and unpacking that. Just loving how they're all weaving together, and such pride. Each one of these groups is so proud of their work, and we have a responsibility to lift them up, because they are working with our littlest legends who will become our K-12 students. An example within the documents that are shared are really tangible, practical strategies for families to use to help them feel confident about bringing their littles to school. And again, I've been talking about sort of increased screen time and changes in childhood. And so we've just decided what's necessary to help and support our families prior to coming to school. And a lot of that comes with, regulation is a big one. When we're not having as much conversation, when we're not having as much unstructured, just imaginative play, children don't have the opportunity to organically learn some of these life skills. So our childcare providers are doing this work before the children even come to school. And I just hope that if we continue on this path, we can start to see great strengthening in our kindergarten classrooms and beyond. And this is just an example of a social story. A social story is something that you can share with a child that's very explicit about what it looks and feels like when you're going to try something new. And so this is an example of our George J site. The George J Childcare is reading this story to the littlest, 3 to 5 year old childcare. And then what it looks like in George J, what kinds of things you'll do. And then of course, as we get deeper into the spring, they'll be walking over, joining in some assemblies, and really starting to feel part of that community. I think, as I said before, that connection, that play, that talking, those things that we've seen such a disruption in the last few years, we need to reinvigorate them. And I think as we continue to map out our operational plan, we've got to keep that at the heart of the work, because that's really what this is all about. And I guess just to close, when you see this activated, like for example, I mentioned Connor and so many of our other principals who are really building that sense of community. Community is so important for our families and for our children. It's something I think it's been a bit lost in the last few years. People are starved for that sense of community. So it's pretty special to see these hubs being created where a continuity of care to learning is taking place. And as we operationalize this, we're going to keep that central to the planning. I'm going to invite any questions. If I can answer them, I would be happy to.
Thank you, Principal Short. Are there any questions this evening following the presentation? Jane, over to you.
Hi there. Thank you for that. And thanks for that, Charmaine. And I wouldn't be doing my members, I'd be doing them a disservice if I didn't mention that we believe that the true seamless approach to childcare involves not only the location, but obviously the individuals that work in those sites, and those, especially those who know the children, the school community and the surrounding community. As you're all aware, more and more school districts are using school staff to provide care in these centers. And there are so many successful stories of the before and after and the early learning centers being done in the school with CUPE staff, or a few school districts, other staff that aren't CUPE, BCGEU, but anyways, the school staff that work in the schools. And we are building, so many centers in this district, including one right in our Tolme office, the Tolme building, and we're not providing any opportunity for full-time jobs for 947 staff. And we also know that we have a real problem with recruitment and retention of workers in our district. And we know that's globally as well. And part of that is there's no full-time work. They're working 2 and 3 jobs. And I see offering them working with them to provide childcare before and after school care, early learning year care as a way to begin to address these issues. I listened to Charmaine's report talking about, building relationships with providers and seeing where we can take that relationship. We use our staff to build these centers. We use them to clean these centers. And I truly believe it's time for this district to examine where we can take this issue using our staff to provide the service in these centers once they're built. Again, there's many success stories, and I'm happy to share. We've got one's on our island, one's on the mainland, obviously. And it really is time to look at this. And I think it would be a great way of keeping staff in-house and providing great care that's seamless right through the school day with the same providers. So thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Are there other questions for District Principal Short? Trustee Painter.
Thank you, Chair. And just to echo Jane's comments, the idea of employing staff, QP staff in these roles has been certainly from the time that we started building these facilities, that was the position of the board. So definitely something that we can examine in a more coherent and constructive way, or a more concrete way going forward, because I certainly agree that this is an opportunity that we're not fully benefiting from. There's a ton of admin that goes with running these facilities, but I have no doubt that they're going to be in need for many years to come. And it's something that I believe we should consciously be transitioning to. But having said that, this is a fantastic story. And thank you very much for bringing it to us, Principal Short. One thing I was wondering about was access for differently abled, if I can use that term, children. And is this something that we're addressing, or in our agreements that we're making sure that there are opportunities to provide spaces for children who may need additional care and support?
Yeah, through the chair, am I able to comment on that? Thanks,
Yes.
Rob. Yeah, the childcare plan again is inclusive childcare, right? To include all neurodiversities. And I think the childcare sector at this point in time is working through a complex inclusive model. So yes, we're working on access for families. The system of children receiving a support worker in childcare is different than a child receiving assistance in a school setting. It's a piece of, I think, really legislation that is currently being worked on at the ministry level, because it's voiced over and over again that the inclusion model needs to be seamless in order for the integration of childcare to truly be seamless.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for District Principal Short? Trustee Kwan.
And I apologize, this might not be a question for you, Charmaine. It might be a question perhaps for that we could revisit or come back with. But I just wondered with regards to funding and, what does the funding look like for these facilities? And really, does that cover just the building of it? Does it cover the staffing costs that it takes to build them? Does it cover maintenance, ongoing maintenance costs for, I think, some of the leases or rental agreements that we're looking at for some of these providers are fairly long term. I think 10 to 15 years is what I've heard. And so, that's a long time to be providing, maintenance costs and that kind of thing too. So I was just curious, how much burden financially are we taking on as a district, by taking on these childcare facilities?
Okay, through the chair.
Yes.
Thank you, Karen, for your question. All right, so two pieces. The New Spaces funding grant application is an incredibly lengthy, if anyone has ever applied for a ministry grant, you can speak to this as well. But yes, it's a very detailed process, and it includes all of the costs of the building and the service delivery. And we are constantly advocating, as we always are in education, to expand and heighten those grants. But yes, that is within the grant funding, is to build the facilities. And then of course, this is a rental agreement. So it's a rental and a service agreement, but the childcare providers are paying rent for the spaces. And so that's part of our operational planning, is ensuring that our rental costs and the agreement language and the terms of the contract are sustainable for the quality of the care as well as the maintenance and management.
Trustee Duncan, then Trustee Corn.
Sorry, I just had a
Trustee Corn,
follow-up.
sorry. Yeah, no, that makes more
All right.
sense.
Yeah, sorry, just to follow up it with regards to, is there any limits on what childcare providers are supposed to be charging for the spots for the little ones that are coming into their care?
Yeah, that's a great through the chair. That's a great question. Again, that's a decision at the ministry level. At this point in time, what happens is they offer their plan to the ministry, and the ministry subsidizes based on their service model. So families aren't impacted by the varying fees, but there is no standardized fee at this time. It is just like in the inclusion model. These are the pieces, like I said, boulders in the path. That's one of them. And it's a really important one when we talk about equity and access.
Thank you. Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair. And again, I don't know if this is really so much for Charmaine, might be for the superintendent or secretary treasurer, but I wonder if we could, and again, it doesn't have to be tonight, but if the board can receive an update on how our district is calculating both the direct and indirect costs of providing these spaces, and further what kind of contractual arrangements are included in the agreements with the providers to allow for or to encourage opportunities for our staff in providing care, in addition to, being an AEA in our district or doing ECE work in our district. So yeah, if we could have an update. And then I think further to that, I know that part of the assessment that districts do when they're deciding how much childcare they can accommodate on school land has to do with enrollment projections. And I know that Charmaine, you spoke to enrollment projections being one element of the consideration. But in addition to enrollment, it's also just sort of space on the land, right? And so my understanding is that the School Act and the ministerial order all require school districts to not only undertake an assessment of enrollment, but also to look at long-term projections, because these are very long-term commitments that school districts are engaged in. And as exciting as it is, we also want to make sure that we're confident that we're leaving enough space for K-12 enrollment increases over that period of time. And so if we could have some more context around that at another meeting, I appreciate that. It's not the time now, but
no, I mean, honestly, I can speak a little bit to that through the chair in that, for example, when I walk into a building, my eyes are now just, and that said, we have schools with spaces. We have schools with empty classrooms. And that doesn't mean we're going to build a childcare, because obviously we want our childcares to be wholesome and sustainable as well. So as tempting as it is, the childcare that we're offering they are primarily the new spaces built by our facilities department exclusively for childcare. We have before and after care offered in gymnasiums throughout the district. And so that's an example of a space within the school, but yeah, primarily most of our space is the spaces being created by our facilities.
Trustee Painter.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point of clarification. I think I might have heard it, but might need it rephrased. I was wondering, are all of the facilities that we provide, are they covered or subsidized by the province, either through the $10 a day or something else, or do we have some independent providers?
Yes, so thank you through the chair. It's a great question. It's it's actually some work we're proud of as part of the request for proposal for our providers includes that they are non-for-profit and that they have to apply for all available subsidies through the government. So subsidies for families, subsidies for their operating and $10 a day, unfortunately, is still a lottery system. But yes, I've yet to meet a provider who has not hoped for that access. Obviously, that's a hope for all, but it is still a lottery system in our province.
Any further questions for District Principal Short? Seeing none, I will thank both District Principal Short as well as Director Davis for their presentations this evening. Very informative. Thank you for all of your work to present to us this evening. And yeah, thanks. We'll move along in our agenda. We do not have a superintendent's report this evening. We do not have any personnel items. And then we move along into finance and legal affairs, where we start looking at, well, we don't start, we continue looking at 2024-2025 enrollment. And first up is kindergarten enrollment for February 2024 via Associate Superintendent Arts.
Yeah, thank you. You'll see I attached a memo in the package on page 45 and a chart there just provided yearly to show you our February kindergarten enrollment numbers compared to the last few years in relation to the number of grade 5s who will be leaving an elementary school. So this is just a high-level overview to give you a sense of if a school is maybe looking to increase in population, decrease, maintain. Over top of that, as mentioned in there, the asterisks, this is before transfer process has taken place. So District Principal Powell will be working on that over the next while, but those students will just move amongst those schools. So the total number shouldn't change. So it's mostly for your information. I'm happy to answer questions if you have them, but
Trustee Kwan.
I just have a couple. It's mostly to do with, first of all, I'll pull out, I guess, Mackenzie and Vic West. Those are the two that we can kind of see where kindergarten enrollment is higher than our outgoing grade 5s. And so, just wondering about those two buildings in particular, as far as capacity and our plans to maybe, do we foresee this being a pattern that's going to be happening over the next few years? And do we have plans as to housing the students, whether we'll be able to do that in a few years?
yeah, great question to the chair. We do meet regularly to take a look at enrollment in schools that we are seeing capacity issues around. So at this time, we're not anticipating any difficulty, but we do have schools that we are aware of that we have to keep monitoring. Last year, remember, we moved a learning studio to Tillicum because it was a school that we were concerned about. So identifying that in advance and trying to have those places plans in place.
Trustee Kwan.
And just one more, it was with regards to Sundance Bank. And I know we didn't have outgoing grade 5s because Sundance Bank doesn't have grade 5s, but I just wondered if we had an idea of what outgoing, I think it's grade 3s. Is it grade 3s that would be?
Right. And they won't be outgoing, they'll advance to the next grade until they get to grade 5. So we are anticipating having 5 divisions there next year with a plan for a learning studio to arrive.
Oh, Chair, you're muted.
That is the second time this evening. Clearly, it is getting on into the night. Not seeing any other hands up for questions for kindergarten enrollment. So with that, we'll move over to District Principal Powell for late French immersion enrollment.
Thank you, Chair. Just in the pack-up, I have a high-level overview of our 4 sites for late French immersion in our district. Just for those that don't have the pack-up, at Arbutus Global, we have 28 students, 11 students on a wait list for late French immersion. At Central, we have 28 students and 8 waitlisted. Lansdowne has 29 students and 8 waitlisted, and Shoreline currently has 22 students. Actually, that's updated, but it has 21 in your pack-up. So 6 spots available now. That's the overview, late French immersion in our district currently. Open to any questions.
Well, that was close. Well, I'll give it to seniority. So Trustee Duncan.
I'm definitely older, but definitely not wiser, right, Trustee Kwan? Thank you, Chair. Thank you to Mr. Powell. Appreciate your update around French immersion enrollment. I just wanted to check in terms of the wait lists. Are these wait lists that you see you're in like normal sort of wait lists from your perspective, or are you seeing a significant increase that you're not sure we'll be able to accommodate?
No, I wouldn't say. I mean, the Lansdowne, we always typically have sorry, through you, Chair. Lansdowne, we typically have a wait list, and Arbutus last year was a bit of an unusual year for them in that they didn't have a wait list. But certainly Central, we had 24 students there when we started in September. So we haven't had a wait list in Central for quite some time. And so great that it's flourishing and it's doing well, and that community is really supporting it. And I would say that's definitely a surprise. Last year we were super heartened that Shoreline was full and had a wait list for the first time. But again, now we do have some spaces there. So I would say the answer is both, not typical in all places, but there's some constants in Lansdowne and Arbutus typically do have wait list students.
Trustee Kwan.
First, I would say, I think what Chair Gagnon meant by seniority is that you've been on the board longer.
That is correct.
Not necessarily age. My question was around specifically the waitlisted students, and I know in the past, and I know this wasn't the only reason why it went, but we did have that late French immersion at Cedar Hill, which we don't have anymore. And if we see, Arbutus Central and Lansdowne are fairly much in the same vicinity, would that be an option to be able to provide some spots for waitlisted students? I mean, I think I see 27 students there themselves just on the waitlisted from those 3 schools. So I just wondered about that.
Yeah, again, through you, Chair, it's not a direct line, Trustee Kwan. It really, in all the families that were waitlisted, only 3 were willing to go to Shoreline, for example, to one of the seats that we do have. Just another point of data, in our registration, we ask families, would you only go to Cedar Hill if it was an option still? So we're still asking that in our families. And only 7 families said, I would only do late French immersion if it were offered at Cedar Hill. And then another 7 students or families said that I would prefer to be at Cedar Hill. And I'm going to choose one of these at 4 other late French immersion sites. So gives you some data is that 14 families would be at Cedar Hill if it were still an option. The difficult part, as you know, is that when you're making a decision for a program of choice, you're really deciding, am I wanting to go to a school that's perhaps farther away from where we live and be a part of this program, or is that proximity the number one thing? And that's a difficult decision for our family. So it is a program of choice. It is available. Again, we have some seats currently at Shoreline, but it's not always one where families will or have the ability to drive or to have transportation to get to the schools. Trustee Kwan.
Yeah, totally fair enough. I know that in our survey, when we ask if families would only choose Cedar Hill or if they prefer, but I just wonder if there's families who have been waitlisted, who are in the other kind of catchment areas, if they've been asked whether they would prefer to be at Cedar Hill, if that, that would make a full class there. I guess that's my question.
Sure, and just to clarify, so all families that were registering for late French immersion, regardless of where they ended up, were asked the question if they would only go to Cedar Hill or would prefer. So it doesn't matter if they were a central family, they were still asked that question. And it was one that you would ignore if it was not relevant to you. Yeah.
Final questions for Principal Powell? Seeing none, thank you for your words. We'll move along to the 2024-2025 ministry-funded enrollment projections, care of the Secretary Treasurer.
Thank you, Chair. So on February 15th, we'll be submitting our enrollment projections for the next 3 years to the ministry. The ministry will use our 2024-2025 projections as the basis for our 2024-2025 operating grant, which will be announced on March 15th. If we look specifically at the regular K-12 enrollment projections, these are projections that are prepared using the enrollment projections that we receive from Verigar Systems. This is a customized planning software that school districts use to project enrollment. And once we receive those projections, they are reviewed by a team internally, and that's the district principal, languages, student support, and climate action. So District Principal Powell, who's here this evening, the Director of IT for Learning, Director of Finance, Budgets, and Financial Reporting, and also the Associate Superintendent. So they look at the enrollment, go through it in detail, and then make adjustments based on their own local knowledge. They do meet again after kindergarten enrollments and make adjustments based on the kindergarten numbers that we receive. I'll also mention too that our enrollment is based on FTE, full-time equivalent students, so not headcount. For students who are in K-9, it is equivalent to a 1.0 FTE. But as we move into the higher grades, grades 10 to 12, a 1.0 FTE would be equivalent to a student taking 8 courses. And quite often students at that level are taking more than 8 courses. So we look historically at what that ratio has been. And so you'll see that the projection for next year includes a ratio of 1.090, which is the same as the actual for the current year. There are lots of factors that impact enrollment. Some of them we've already touched on in other conversations, including birth rates. So in 2019, the birth rates were down, so we see a lower kindergarten enrollment, for example. We also would look at incoming kindergartens versus outgoing grade 12s, and then net in migration. So as Dr. Jeff Davis was discussing, we have seen a fairly significant increase in our ministry-funded international students, particularly over the last couple of years. And so we have included some of that, but bearing in mind that there may be an impact by the stabilizing measures that the Government of Canada has put in. And we have seen some increase in intra-provincial migration, so people moving from the Lower Mainland, for example. But overall, I think our province is seeing a migration loss as families are moving out of BC and into other provinces that are more affordable. If you want to take a look at the chart that's on page 51 of the agenda package, these are our actual projections for the next 3 years. The first column is our actual enrollment for the current year that we're in, 23-24. And then you'll see the projections for the next 3 years. Comparing the current year to next year's projections, we're looking at an overall increase of enrollment of 189.6 FTE. And this is mainly attributed to ministry-funded international students and immigrant permanent residents, including refugees. And if we break that down, kindergarten, we're seeing a reduction of 37 FTE. Total elementary down by 48 FTE. At middle, we see an increase of 121 FTE, and secondary is up by 116.6 FTE. And now if we shift to the supplement for unique student needs, these enrollment estimates are based on the knowledge of the corresponding department heads, plus taking into consideration factors such as incoming Ks and outgoing grade 12s. And these enrollments are funded over and above the regular K to 12 enrollments. So the chart that you see at the bottom of page 51 shows the enrollment increase or decrease for the various categories within there. It does look like we're expecting it to be static for all categories except for what the ministry called special needs, which is our inclusive education. So there's changes in all levels. Level 1, we are seeing a decrease of 4 FTE. Level 2 going down by 1 FTE, but level 3 going up by 7 FTE. So that's a really high level overview of that. And we have lots of experts here on enrollment in the room. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Trustee Kwan.
Yeah, I guess looking at the top chart on page 51 of the pack-up, and I was just noticing that we're seeing a fair increase in numbers, especially in secondary, and I think middle as well. And so, I mean, I know that we do have certain schools, again, that we're already seeing overcapacity. And so I wondered if, you know, if there's any context as to a breakdown of where we're seeing those numbers increase, and if we expect that to be at those schools that we're already, you know, are feeling that crunch, and if we have any plans or things that need to be discussed in that direction. So.
Through the chair, we're maybe just a little bit early, Trustee Kwan. It's transfer week is just happened, and we'll be meeting in a couple of weeks to know where we have our actual enrolled students and where students are moving to. And so once we get that, we'll have a much better sense of our pressure points. We are aware, though, that in schools that are over or nearing capacity, we will be limiting their transfers to who can come in based on the enrollment priorities in order to try to control that school size.
Sounds good. Jumping the gun a bit. Sorry about that.
No, it's good. The timing is perfect. We're working on it as we speak.
Any additional questions? Seeing none, we'll move along in the agenda onto Feeding Future School Food Programs update via the Deputy Superintendent.
Yeah, through the chair, there's a memo there in the packet for you, just a high-level overview of food and the Feeding Futures Fund. All of our schools are engaged in providing food. There are varying levels of the food available, but certainly every school has a breakfast with toast. We do offer hot lunches in mostly secondary and the one-off lunches that happen through our middle school and elementary. And we have partnerships that have been developed that continue to expand the programs. One of the big issues for partnerships is our community partners are not big enough to provide a particular product to all schools, but do very well in certain areas within our district. We continue to build those partnerships to support food and food security, particularly on weekends and holidays with our families. And I've left a little bit of a summary there of the 12 refrigerators and 11 toasters, bigger commercial toasters that schools required to support those breakfast programs. And then the allocation that we know has a 3-year commitment from the ministry. Happy to answer any questions.
Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And thank you to the Deputy Superintendent for the report. I just wanted to maybe have a discussion if we could, just in terms of how we're incorporating some of the feedback that we've heard from high schools around food and both availability, access, quality of food, and to what extent we're able to factor some of the feedback that we've received from students about food availability into our planning for the next sort of budget cycle, so for the 2024-25 school year. And appreciate if that's something that would need to be brought back, but just wondering if there's been any discussion or planning in relation to that to date.
Yes, through the chair. Again, given that this is the first time that our district has been able to work through an issue of food on this level, we really are exploring all opportunities to increase that quality and increase, quite frankly, the amount in terms of, is it breakfast, lunch, and a snack? Is it how can we actually support the need for food within each of those buildings? Since we've started in January, and this was prior to, I believe, the student, at least the secondary students providing input, 2 of our largest secondary schools are now offering a Monday to Friday full hot lunch. So that was not part of the conversation with our students prior to this development in January. So as we expand that, we are looking to what is it that the students want. Surveys have gone out to all of our schools in terms of what's working, what's not, how do we improve it. Feedback that we heard, particularly with students in the morning, they're arriving too late to get their breakfast, but breakfast is offered. So they have to make a decision here. Do I need to get to school a little earlier and have that breakfast, or are we looking at other options that can extend it a bit? It is dependent on people providing the service, and we have a schedule or a time frame for each of those people that are providing the services within those schools. So it's difficult to extend it if we're not starting later, because if it's an hour that's allocated to a breakfast and we're going past that hour, how are we accommodating the staff that are involved in that? So there are a lot of pieces there that we have looked at, and we continue to have those conversations with schools, and we continue to ask for the input from students to better serve their needs as well. So I hope that answered your question.
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent. It actually answered my question, so that's a plus, because mine was going to be around timing as well, because we know the quantity and the quality is so important, but if no one's able to access it, then it doesn't matter. But if there's plans underway to address or examine that, then that's all for the better. Any final questions on the Feeding Futures food program? Seeing none, we'll move along in the agenda to the 2024 Budget Technology Plan via the Director of Information Technology, Director Canty.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to speak again. I included a memo in the pack-up, page 54, and this was in response to a couple of good questions raised in giving the technology update at the previous committee meeting. So the first question was regarding providing budget scenarios for moving from a 2-to-1 to 3:1 device student to device ratio. And so I provided 3 scenarios, 2:1 ratio, 2.5:1 ratio, and 3:1 ratio to give some examples of investment differences when you take into account our current inventory and age of inventory. And then the second question was regarding the student voice and other feedback from schools around the impact of Wi-Fi performance issues in certain areas of our school district. And the question was, where are we from a resource investment perspective? And do we need to invest more in wireless technology to improve performance and access? And in the memo, I just share some information around the fact that we are in year 3 of our network infrastructure technology plan. And it's crucial that that plan continues. That plan is upgrading and replacing wireless equipment across our district, across all of our schools. However, it's good to know that that plan is really around performance and stability and security, safety of the existing network. It wasn't a plan to increase coverage and density and capacity as the use of devices and the use of Wi-Fi grows. And so I think we are seeing alongside this plan areas, especially in elementary schools, for example, where the coverage was much more spread out because of less devices at the time, where we are finding areas, or it might be through reconfiguration of rooms or of the building and the use of the building, where there are certain areas where we need to go in and with our facilities colleagues install wireless access points to keep the coverage at a good accessible ratio. So just what I've proposed there in that the question, to answer the question, would we need to invest more to improve the performance? It's difficult to estimate those specific areas until we have the opportunity to go back into schools and do the site surveys and do the fresh walkthroughs. So a potential solution would be a contingency fund over and above the network infrastructure existing plan to allow for emergent areas where we need to install more wireless capacity. So there's some numbers there, and happy to take any questions on that memo. Thank you for the time.
Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And thank you to Director Canty. Really appreciate all the information that you were able to provide us so quickly in the way of estimates for our consideration in the context of budget and the student to device ratio options, but also just, you know, I had not appreciated that the network infrastructure plan, the scope of that, you know, really didn't cover a review and funding for include, you know, adding additional infrastructure to support more wireless coverage or maybe more stable wireless coverage in parts of our building. But certainly it came across quite loud and clear that there are certain dead zones or classrooms potentially where there's sudden, you know, increase in traffic on the network, where the learning is either interrupted or delayed as a result of stability of their Wi-Fi connection. So yeah, just really appreciate you giving us some options and laying out a potential solution, you know, where we could start to layer in some investments that would allow your department to address some of that other additional scope. Are you hopeful that some of the network investments in terms of the hardware that you're replacing will address some of that Wi-Fi availability and network stability issues?
Through the chair, yes, the existing plan does increase performance. It's putting in newer devices that have greater capacity. So I should be clear that there is a performance improvement in the existing network infrastructure plan. But what it does not account for is actually physically wiring in more new wireless access points throughout the buildings. That, in all honesty, would be a kind of follow-on. The idea was put in place a network infrastructure plan that really brought us up to full supportability. So network equipment that we can patch and secure and is providing the best quality within the installation areas that's already in place. So there will be a performance, and that we have seen a performance improvement each time we upgrade these devices in place. The point, the separation is really around where net new installation might be required for reasons we've spoken to before, increased access or a change in access within the school.
Lori with VCPAC.
Hi, thank you. I'm just wondering, will that change maybe next school year when students, like when there's a cell phone policy, so that maybe students won't be using all the Wi-Fi all at the same time?
Thank you for the question. I think there needs to be a lot more discussion and review of what that change might look like in schools. So I think that's a pending conversation and review. And I would defer to the senior leadership team for further information around potential school guidance around use of cell phones and use of personal devices. It also requires a review of the wireless traffic being used by district-owned devices such as iPads and Chromebooks, specifically purchased for students for learning in the classroom and in the common areas, versus personal devices. And we have already made arrangements at the district network level to partition some of that contention, so that personal devices do not stop the use of Chromebooks and iPads. So I can't give it's a good question. I think there's more to understand here. But I will say there's already some architecture put in place to allow for personal devices in schools, but ensure that they don't swallow all of the bandwidth, all of the internet service, all of the speed required by the Chromebooks and iPads being used within the classroom day in, day out.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Just looking to the superintendent and team if they had any follow-up to that.
Well, I think that Director Canty did a fantastic job answering that question. I can add just a few things, just as he mentioned, we do have many more conversations to have around this. We are looking at creating consistency across the district and speaking specifically about restrictions on or providing opportunities for focused learning time that doesn't have necessarily cell phone use or other electronics, not just cell phones, but other electronics. But again, it's about the distractions and distraction-free learning time, which requires lots of conversations with our partners, stakeholders, and rights holders.
Thanks. Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, just had one more question for Director Canty while we have him here. Just around whether there's any component to this in terms of some of the feedback we've heard from students and staff around the availability and reliability of Wi-Fi, whether there's any kind of ISP, like a provider component to any of this. I don't profess to understand all of the provincial level arrangements in place to provide services to school districts, but I am curious whether there is an ISP aspect to this.
Thank you, Trustee Duncan. And so just for anyone who may not know ISP, so you're referring to the internet service provider and the actual core service we're receiving throughout the district. I'm not aware of any issues or concerns in terms of hitting that bandwidth maximum. We have a network team that are constantly monitoring not only bandwidth availability, but also the actual throughput available on the equipment itself. So is any single firewall or switch or router at its capacity and impacting? We have all sorts of alerts and visual aids to monitor these things. That's not a current concern. I do think there are really important network architecture conversations happening, of which we're fortunate to be a part of as a pilot district, around what does the next generation of internet look like. And what we're advocating for as a school district is there will be a significant increase required on bandwidth as more and more solutions go digital, but not only digital, but video-based, audio-based, better quality graphics. And as we look at emergent technology such as virtual reality, artificial intelligence, etc., they're very potentially very high resource intensive on bandwidth. So I don't think it's a current concern. We're not seeing that capacity issue with our current ISP provision, but we're advocating for a much more flexible and faster network architecture in the next iteration.
Thank you. It's good to keep on our board radar. Thanks.
Trustee Painter, did you still have the question?
Thank you, Chair. Director Canty, I apologize right off the bat because this is kind of a yeah but question. Looking at what you laid out for network infrastructure and replacement of devices, one of the things I'm mindful for is that it proved very challenging last year for us to make up a shortfall in prior years spending on infrastructure and devices. Do we have a sense of, for the infrastructure, for example, year 4 and year 5 are still going forward, but at the end of year 5, are we looking at a reduced steady state, or are we going to be looking at likely the same amount going forward just to maintain the system on an ongoing stable basis? I'll stop there. I wonder.
Thank you, Trustee Painter. This will be part of the technology planning happening in the coming year. So you're right that we need to be looking further ahead. We have been internally around next steps. Part of this is the conversation of the future network architecture and future provincial agreements around network provision. And I think if I could take that away and at a future date come back with there might be more variance in those projections because they're going to be longer range, but come back with a longer multi-year projection for everything you see here actually beyond this. So I think that's part of the technology planning that we're doing this year, and I look forward to bringing that back to the committee and to the board.
No, thanks very much. And I do appreciate that it's out of scope for your presentation tonight. So thank you for indulging me.
Any other questions for Director Canty? Seeing none, thank you for your presentation. We'll now turn it over to the Secretary Treasurer for, I need to find the exact wording, the Audit Subcommittee report on the December 2023 quarterly financial report.
Thank you, Chair. Just provide an overview of the memo on behalf of the Audit Subcommittee report, who nominated Trustee Painter as the ongoing chair of the committee. We had our last meeting on February 5th, and Associate Secretary Treasurer Lepner provided an overview of the December 2023 quarterly financial report. And there is a recommended motion that the board accept the December 2023 quarterly financial report as presented to the Audit Subcommittee. Included in the agenda is the memo that was provided to the committee, as well as the financial report.
Questions, Trustee Kwan?
Julie's been fighting something off for a while, and when we had our audit subcommittee, we knew she didn't have much of a voice. So she answered a lot of the questions that we had with her memo, which was extremely well written and very detailed. So thank you for that. I just had one question about the report, and I think either the Secretary Treasurer or Associate Secretary Treasurer could probably answer. That's a mouthful. It's just on the line for services, and I know that we budgeted less for our services this year. However, it looks like our actual spend is almost $250,000 more. So I just wondered if we were on track to keep with that budget, if we're confident that we will, or if we're a little worried about that.
Associate Secretary Treasurer Lepner.
Through the chair, when I was reviewing the service contract line items, there was nothing that jumped out at me that would lead me to believe that we're not on track. It was likely just a timing of contracts. Sometimes they're paid like the month prior, or contracts just were written more in the latter half of the year. So, but yeah, everything looks okay.
Any other questions on the quarterly financial report? Seeing none, there is a recommended motion. I'm looking to see if anybody is willing to move it. Trustee Kwan moves. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion as presented? That is unanimous. Thank you all. Stall for time as I scroll up. We now move to the monthly financial report for January 2024.
Thank you, Chair. The monthly financial report can be found on page 64 of your agenda package. This is the monthly financial report for January. The figures that are included in the report for January 2023 were run after month end, and they were the numbers that were reported at the February 2023 ops meeting. The January 2024 numbers were also run after month end. One thing I will note is that the budget for both years would ordinarily be the preliminary budget plus changes to date. But Julie and her team have been working very hard on preparing the final budget, which is coming to the board on February 26th. And so quite a few of those adjustments were posted in January in order to be in for the January month end. So I'll just add that as a caveat. If you have a lot of questions, we may want to defer them until the final budget is presented, but feel free to ask anyways, and we can let you know if it's something that's in the works. The actuals for this report represent the expenses for 7 months, so from July 1st until the end of January. And if we're looking at the revenue, the percentage that's showing there, that's the amount of revenue that we've budgeted but have not yet received. And so the current year, we're looking at 46% compared to 45% last year, so pretty close. When you look at the very end of the report at the expenses, the total expenses, the percentage remaining there is the amount of expense budget that's still available to spend. And so the current year we're at 50%, whereas last year we were at 47%. So happy to answer any questions, or also we will be bringing some more information to the board on February 26th when the final budget is presented.
Any questions on the monthly financial report? Trustee Kwan.
Yeah, with the offshore student tuition fees, I know it's been explained to me that usually by this time or close to in February, we've received most of the tuition that we will be receiving for the year. So I just wondered that available outstanding balance there, that's about just over $20,000. Do we anticipate to receive that?
Associates, Secretary Treasurer Lettner.
Through the chair. Yes, we still are making tweaks to the offshore student tuition fees. This was, the report was run right after month end, and we got as many adjustments in as we could, but we still haven't done a lot of the cleanup entries. So yes, I would expect us to receive those last little bits trickling in, but we'll have a better idea once we're actually preparing the final budget documents.
Other questions? Not immediately seeing one. I'm going to ask one of myself. I know we've had the ongoing discussions with the District of Saanich around water, and I was just wondering how that has come over the last month. Associate Secretary Treasurer Lettner.
The chair. So good news, we did get a reduction in fees. So, but unfortunately we didn't get a full reduction of that. But it definitely has come to a conclusion. So we'll be paying, if we haven't paid it already, we'll be paying it shortly, the remaining bills. And I'll be making an adjustment in the final budget for the utilities portion to incorporate the increased costs, but less a piece that we got back. So we can thank our energy manager for that.
Great, thank you. Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, just a further question related to that. Have we identified whether this is an ongoing issue moving forward? Like, have we identified the source of the problem?
Associate Secretary Treasurer.
Through the chair. Marnie might be able to speak more to it, but my understanding is they've cut off any potential areas where the leak might have stemmed from. So we don't expect it to be a problem in the future. As far as what caused it, I don't know if we've figured that one out.
Thank you.
Trustee Kwan.
Yeah, and again, just point me in the right direction till February 26th if we have more information coming. I was just curious about the TTOC salaries, and it looked like as far as the available budget goes, we have a lot more to work with this year than we did last year at this time. Just wondering if that's correct or whether things will change with the amended budget.
Associate Secretary Treasurer Lettner.
Through the chair. So we did adjust for the final budget. We had to do quite a big budget adjustment. I believe Last year, we would have done it after we ran month end, because I remember we were waiting kind of for the month end projections before we could make any adjustment, but we kind of tried to time it so we could get that adjustment in. So that's based on the trends that we're seeing last year and this year for the remaining few months of the year, February to June, how many ever months that is.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll move on from the monthly financial report and we'll go into facilities planning, where we get an operations update from the Director of Facilities.
Hi, everybody. Quick update, Oakland shoring. So we're actually working with the consultants right now on costing, hoping to get that into the ministry in February, so this month. Fingers crossed, we'll see some funding approvals in March. That's for Oakland's. And then we're still completing the yearly lead water testing. Everything has to be submitted to the ministry in May. I think we have 9 more fountains to go, and then we'll get that all into the spreadsheet. We're starting our yearly walkthroughs with the school protection program, so that's always fun. And then Eagle View and View Royal, those are the 2 locations where the pipes burst. So they're now fixed, and we're very, very close to being out of there with all the repairs and all the remediation done, so that's nice. Minor capital, we're actually both minor capital and maintenance. We're starting to work on our summer projects. So we're organizing all the equipment that we need, like scaffolding and stuff for the summer, and getting our materials ordered, so that's fun. We're also right in the middle of getting our specs on our way for all our roofing projects that happen in the summer. So we're planning a couple months out right now. Childcare updates, Charmaine did a great job updating you. View Royal is now open. Hillcrest and Lake Hill are on schedule to open as scheduled. And Vic High, we're just working with the purchasing department for the RFQ for the site work. So that's going to start in March, early April. Sundance, it's all planned to be portable to be split and moved in spring break. So that will be exciting. Operations, they're actually piloting some new chemicals in the schools, with 2 schools actually, with the aim to reduce consumption and increase the number of green products in our schools. And they're actually piloting new paper towel dispensers at 2 sites, one's being facilities. And I have to say the paper towel is a lot nicer than the current ones that we use. So I'm enjoying the paper towel. And it's the aim to, it's essentially, it stops the end of the roll waste. And it's, we'll save on greenhouse gases because there's less shipping. And so we'll save money all around. So that's a win. Transportation portal, that's opening in March for all the busing kids within our school. And then we're actually doing something a lot different that's going to save us money. We're actually going to train the trainers. So on our fall arrest harness recertification, big word, we're able to train our staff that can train and look at all our harnesses every single year. So we don't have to hire a consultant to do that to save money. Network and security department, they're always servicing tech packages. A number of schools were done. The big thing that they're doing right now is they're actually providing ongoing support with TELUS for their copper to fiber optic cable upgrade. And pretty much the whole team right now, including some teams from Andy's department, is actually at Vic High right now trying to get that wrapped up for the staff and students to come in. And Brian Leslie, the energy manager, he's wrapped up all the internal LED lights for now, and he's just starting to wrap up all the external LED lights for the 2023-24 school year. Any questions?
Trustee Painter.
Thank you, Chair. Just because it's a parallel situation, is there any update on the Burnside shoring issue?
Yeah, we put it a little bit, I don't want to say we put it on the back burner, but we're focusing really hard on Oakland's right now, because that looks like that's the one that the ministry might be favorable in funding right now. And we're also looking in a little bit more into the drawings to see how much of Burnside we have to do, because there was a lot of the initial report took some assumptions that the same architect as Oakland's, but we already know that there's been some work done at Burnside, and so we're digging into those drawings to figure out exactly what has to get done at Burnside. We don't think as much work needs to be done. So the assumption was in the first place it would, and the shoring's up so it's safe. That's number one. Now we're going to dig into drawings from there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions on the ops update? Seeing none, maybe this is the last time we talk about Vic High without students in there? Maybe?
When's the ops in March? Maybe, yes,
Very,
last
very
day.
early.
Okay. Oh, darn, no, we get one more then, because let me update you on Vic High, and you'll know why in a sec. So it's progressing. We're now on to deficiencies, which is really nice. So all the work is done, and we're on to deficiencies. The school district team and Andy's team is right now in there working hard on the Wi-Fi and getting the computers in and all the tech packages in right now, which is a big job. What else can I tell you? This week, actually tomorrow night, we're having all the teachers come and visit their rooms and get an idea for what they need to bring over from SJ Willis over to Vic High, since things have changed just a little bit in the last couple of years for them for the property. So that will be nice. And the move is still planned to start in March 15th. So depending on when this meeting is, you may or may not get students in the building by then. It's May 15th. So they'll be moving in over spring break. They will be moving in over spring break.
March 4th is our next meeting. So
one
more.
Okay, one more.
Questions on Vic High? Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, just briefly, Marnie, my usual question around budget, just wondering how we're doing. Is everything?
Yeah, there's a lot of variables right now because the contract manager is budgeting out. Unfortunately, they've had a couple health issues. The person that normally budgets out is in the hospital right now. So we weren't able to get, we've taken the worst case scenario of absolutely everything, and we'll be $1.5 million over. But there's no plan that we're going to be having the worst case scenario and everything. So that's the way we budgeted it. So we'll know more probably in about a month and a half to 2 months where we're sitting once everything comes in and all progress claims come in.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Not the best update, but.
Trustee Kwan.
And I don't know, Marnie, if this is a question for you or for someone else on the team, but I've just wondered, as far as transition and students, is it just one, you know, they leave for spring break and they're at SJ Willis and then they come back to the new school, or is there a transition where they actually get some familiarity, some tours of what the school looks like, that kind of thing?
My understanding is they get a day of tours of it. They're going to come in groups, and they're going to have a day, and there's going to be like a day of it for the students with a barbecue and stuff. So don't quote me on that, though. Watch, it won't happen. So there'll be something. I know there's planning something for the students. If they just don't show up, that's a big school to get to wander around.
Any other questions on Vic High? Seeing none, time for the Cedar Hill Middle School update.
Yeah, so the site's progressing. They're currently working on foundations. And the sheet metal shop drawings are approved now. So the sheet metal is in the manufacturing schedule, and it should arrive at the end of March for the scheduled deadline, which is great. The agreement with Saanich for the offsite work is very close to being completed. So that's exciting. That's been, it seems like years in progress, but it's only been months. So that will be nice. So yeah, it's just coming along slowly. Any questions?
Looking, seeing none. Thank you for your time, Director of Facility.
You're welcome.
Let's see, what else do we have on this here agenda? Public disclosure of in-camera items. I do not believe we have any this month. New business. Don't see any jumping up trustees. Notice of motion. Samesies. General announcements. None scheduled, none happening. I will look for a motion to adjourn. Trustee Duncan. All those in favor? And that passes unanimously. Thank you so much to all our presenters, and thank you for everybody for participating tonight. We will see you all again.